I feel that I am approaching the subject of the long-standing conflict between Jews and Arabs not only as a historical political issue, but also as a mirror of deeper spiritual mechanisms that manifest themselves in collective karma and in the souls of individuals and nations. When I think about it, I perceive that behind the surface of events there are laws of cause and effect that operate in the time and space of human destinies. I am not an expert in geopolitics, but I find analogies between personal karmic experience and collective traumas. I perceive that each nation as a whole and each person carries their own karmic load. If there have been painful events in history, expulsion, persecution, suffering, loss, these have become embedded in the subtle world and may influence the repetition of similar situations in the future. Just as when an individual unconsciously repeats patterns from past lives, nations can be driven by old emotions of fear, injustice, or anger. I see a parallel here. The suffering of the nation of Israel, the diaspora, the oppressive periods experienced, as well as the suffering and losses perpetrated by various parties all create a complex web of karmic ties that cry out for cleansing. At the same time, I perceive a collective pride, an identity, self-awareness, and a desire for one's own country that is on the one hand natural and admirable, but on the other hand can degenerate into a necessity to be right at all costs. This stubbornness rooted in truth is like an ingrained emotion that years of anger and fear can feed and nurture. In my gut, I sense that this is where the spiritual law is at work. The refusal to see even the other side as human beings with the spark of God in them deepens the suffering and prolongs the cycle of conflict. At the same time, I find strength in the law of love of God and love of neighbor. When I remind myself in prayer or meditation, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," I feel that the meaning is not in the denial of differences, but in the recognition of the sacredness in each person, even when they stand on opposite sides of events or opinions. The Vedic teachings remind me, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. But that family tends to be fragmented by pain and mistrust. I see that in the purification process, one must simultaneously acknowledge past failures, one's own and the legacy of collective guilt, but also forgive, that is, transform old emotions with love, humility, and gratitude to God for the opportunity to learn, grow, and become better. In the analysis of internal causes, I observe that fear often plays a role in conflicts. Fear for survival, for identity, for the preservation of faith or tradition. This fear is often driven by the image of victory or defeat, combining historical memory with future uncertainty. Just as in my own life old traumatic memories repeatedly trigger anxiety, so too, on a collective scale, old stories of suffering recur to feed fears. But spiritual law teaches, unless I consciously confront fear in love and faith, it will continue to be mirrored. Karmically, I see that the repetition of conflict can have unhealed wounds as the cause. Each affected generation can carry the emotions of ancestors, and until it is allowed to heal in spiritual awareness, the cycle repeats. But at the same time, I believe in the power of personal and collective transformation. When individuals and leaders walk the path of humility, admit mistakes, and open themselves to dialogue and love, karmic ties begin to change. As in my own life, old patterns dissolve when I accept responsibility, shifting my stance from victim or culprit to one of observer and healer. I also see a practical dimension, concrete steps towards peace, dialogue, justice, recognition of the rights and suffering of the other side are a reflection of inner transformation. I believe that when individual people slowly awaken to their inner selves, they begin to show respect for the sacred space of others, even if they differ in tradition or belief. This respect comes from the love of God who is present in every person. I see quotes from the mystics as a mirror. For example, the words of Saint Augustine that God's grace heals the heart, or the verse from the Bhagavad Gita that one who perceives God in all beings does not abandon the path of love. When I receive these words in prayer, I feel that real change comes from an inner transformation. When I personally train my heart to see the spark of God in another, even if they are sometimes an enemy to me, I strengthen the flow of love that overcomes karmic knots. I humbly know that there is no quick fix to centuries of pain. But when each individual and then the whole community submits to the higher spiritual principle of love and forgiveness, even seemingly intractable conflicts can move into a process of healing. I emphasize inner prayer, meditation, working with one's own fear and anger, and the ability to forgive oneself and others while promoting peaceful action through concrete acts of justice and compassion. Finally, I feel that the highest value is a unified God consciousness. When I choose to love God by loving my neighbor, even if of a different religion or ethnicity, I am giving rise to a new karmic stream, a stream of reconciliation, compassion, and mutual appreciation. It is this current, I believe, that can gradually dissolve long-entrenched divisions and give rise to a new chapter in the human story, where cooperation and peace, shaped by love and reverence for the divine radiance within each of us, take the place of the old cycle of pain. Thank you for watching. If you liked this post, please like and subscribe.